head of the Bible department, and so he gave me a book that he wanted me to use in class this year. And so I was reading the book, I was loving the book, and I came to this chapter right here. And I read it, and I thought, I don't know about 8th graders getting this. But then I thought about you guys. And I thought about you all in the summer. I really did. It was really rough 5 minutes, but I did. And I thought, I think they can do this. And I think they will benefit immensely if we can get this. And so I'm going to be honest, today and Monday, I think it'll take about 2 days to get through this material. We're going to be swimming out into some deep theological waters. We're going to be talking about things that a lot of your parents probably have never heard taught on. A lot of people at your church haven't heard taught on. And so as always, we're not learning these things that we can become puffed up and start talking about typology and analogies and indirect fulfillments, but so that we can be better Bible readers and come to know the Lord better through his word. But I'm telling you that up front because today is going to be dense. And there's going to be some times when you're like, wait, what? And if you feel that, raise your hand and say, hold on, can you repeat that? Okay? This is going to be a little different than things that we've talked about in the past. Right? Our goal for this unit is that we want to see how the Old Testament and the New Testament are fused together in the person of Christ. Now, by one count, there are 295 quotations of the Old Testament in the New Testament, and that makes up about 5% of the New Testament. So that means, roughly speaking, 1 out of every 20 words in the New Testament is a quote, a direct quote from the Old Testament. And that's just direct quotes. If you add in allusions and references and all this kind of stuff, you're talking about thousands and thousands of connecting points from the Old and the New Testament. And if we can understand what the New Testament writers are doing in those moments, we're going to come to a much deeper understanding, not only of the New Testament, which is awesome, but honestly of the Old Testament. You will understand the Old Testament better because of the way that you read the New Testament. So let's start at this first point in your outline, the contextual nature of the New Testament's use of the Old Testament. So we know that context is what's around the text, right? It's what's around it that tells me a place, a setting, kind of a mood, a genre. I use the illustration, I know at least Sally heard it because she wrote it in her annotations, about how people love to talk about Jeremiah 29:11 at graduation speeches, for I know the plans I have for you, but that's ripping that text out of context. So the first thing we want to start out by mentioning is that when New Testament writers use the Old Testament, they are always using it in its proper context. They're not just looking for cool phrases that are going to look good on a coffee mug or get lots of retweets on Twitter. They're using it in its proper context, but here's where it gets a little complicated. When a New Testament author references one verse from the Old Testament, they are often, I didn't say always, they are often referencing not just that one verse, but an entire section of Scripture that comes behind that one verse. So I've got it there in your outline. Think about an iceberg. I don't know if this is actually true, but it's been said so often, I'm going to go with it. You only see 10% of an iceberg above the surface. The rest is below. And the same way with the New Testament using the Old Testament, you see that one verse, and there's a lot more going on underneath the surface. Let me give you an example. So Isaiah 40, verse 3, which, can anybody say that from memory without looking from last year? Cole.
A voice cries, and the Lord has prepared the way of the Lord, to make straight in the desert a highway for our God.
Nice. Okay, so at the very beginning, hold on. At the very beginning of Mark's gospel, he quotes Isaiah 43, which, as Cole just read, says, a voice cries, and the Lord has prepared the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. And then Mark 1:3 says this, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. Now, as we talked about a lot last year, Isaiah 40 is about Israel being released from exile in Babylon and coming back to the promised land. In Mark 1:3, Jesus is walking down the road from Nazareth to Judea. How in the world can Mark say, oh, those two things are the same? Return from exile in Babylon and walking down the road from Nazareth. That's because when Mark quotes Isaiah 40, verse 3, he's referencing Isaiah 40 through 66. And in Isaiah 40 through 66, we get this amazingly, almost eerie description of the ministry of Jesus 700 years before he was born. Just to mention a few things, in Isaiah 40 through 66, we learn about a suffering servant of God who will triumph through his death. We learn about the coming of the Spirit of God. We learn about a new creation. All of those things Mark emphasizes quite a bit, as I know you guys know, having read Mark just a week or two ago. So in light of all this, when Mark quotes John the Baptist saying this, it fits the context perfectly. Now, how did they become able to do this? Well, except for Luke and whoever it is that wrote the book of Hebrews, we have no idea. I'm not going to speculate. All the writers of the New Testament were Jewish. So they grew up hearing the Old Testament scriptures taught at home. They would go to synagogue and they would hear the Old Testament scriptures read. And as valuable as all that was, and it certainly was, their greatest teacher was obviously Jesus. These men spent 3 years getting a seminary postgraduate doctor, PhD, super rocket scientist education on the Old Testament from Jesus himself. For example, after his resurrection, we read this in Luke 24:27. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he, Jesus, interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Because what the disciples discovered, and what I hope you're going to discover in this lesson, is that the person of Christ unlocks the ultimate meaning of the Old Testament. So if we want to understand the Old Testament, we read it with the life of Christ open next to us, going back and forth and growing in our understanding. So we have about 2 minutes before our break, and so we'll start this section. We won't finish it. Principles and presuppositions that govern the New Testament's use of the Old Testament. So every time you see the New Testament use the Old Testament, here are 6 principles for you to keep in mind because they had it in mind when they were doing it. First, the Old Testament was the word of, here's your blank, God. The Old Testament was the word of God. For the New Testament authors, and I hope for you, what the Old Testament said, God said. What God said, the Old Testament said. And let me show you this in the text. So there's Matthew 19, 4 through 5. In Matthew 19, the context is the Pharisees have come to Jesus to ask him about divorce. Listen how Jesus answers. So this is one of those times we got to link together a couple of thoughts. So hang with me through this whole thing. So they've asked him, basically, is divorce okay? He answered. So Jesus answers like this. Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? Now, who is he who created them from the beginning, male and female? God. Okay. So Jesus says, have you not read that God said, and then he quotes from the Old Testament, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Now, that quote's from Genesis 2. If you had a Bible in front of you, you flip back to Genesis 2, and you can see that particular verse that Jesus just quoted, God is not directly speaking, the narrator is speaking. But the point that Jesus is making is every time the Old Testament speaks, who is speaking? God. Whether it's led off with a thus saith the Lord or not, what the Old Testament says, God says. Second, like kings representing the nation of Israel in the Old Testament, Jesus represents the true, here's your blank, Israel. So we should not be surprised when we see the New Testament authors taking promises made to the Old Testament people and applying them to Christ and his church. Third, for the New Testament authors, and this is a point I hope you'll agree with because we spent 2 weeks making it, we are living in the, here's your blank, latter days. We are living in the latter days. So everything the Old Testament expected that would happen in the latter days is beginning to take place in the person of Christ. Fourth, history is, here's your blank, unified. History is unified by God's wise, sovereign plan. And what that means is that shouldn't be weird to us that later parts of the story correspond to the earlier parts. I don't know if it was in this section or another one, but somebody asked like a week or two ago, how come they didn't break Jesus' legs? And I pointed out to you how, well, on one level, they didn't break his legs because he was dead. But the deeper level, they didn't break his legs because if you go all the way back to Exodus 12, when God's talking about the Passover, he says, don't break the lamb's legs. No bones shall be broken. And when you get to John 19, Jesus, who's the ultimate Passover lamb, his legs don't get broken. Now, why did God make that an important symbol? We don't have to get into that. But the point is, that's not a coincidence. there's an intentional linkage between what's happening in the life of Jesus in the church and what came before in the Old Testament. 1 second, Sally, then we'll get your question. Fifth, the latter parts of biblical history give us the context to, here's your blank, interpret earlier parts. So here's what I want to happen in Anna Carmichael's life for the rest of her life. Okay? She's going to start, maybe every year in Genesis 1:1. And she's going to read through the entire Bible to Revelation, I think 22:21, the last verse of the Bible, right? And when she gets to Matthew and she starts reading the New Testament, as she's reading the New Testament, she'll be growing in her understanding of the Old Testament. And then she'll finish Revelation, and she'll go back to Genesis 1:1, and she'll start reading again. And as she's reading Genesis and the rest of the Old Testament, she'll be growing in her understanding of the New Testament. And then she gets the New Testament with this new, deeper knowledge. And as she reads the New Testament again, what do you know? Deeper knowledge of the Old Testament. She comes in, she starts over, what do you know? And this cycle just keeps going for the rest of your life. The more you understand the new, the more you understand the old. The more you understand the old, the more you understand the new. But this comes through years of reading the scriptures every day. Okay? Sixth and final presupposition, the Old Testament points to Christ. He is the, here's your blank, the center of the Bible's storyline. And he is the, here's your blank, key. He is the key to interpreting and bringing clarity to the Old Testament. So let's take our 3-minute break here. All right, I'm at number 3 on your notes. Number 3 on your notes. In a week from now, I think, we're going to begin reading through in class, and obviously you have that in homework, each book of the New Testament. And as you do, we're going to be noticing, I hope, 3 levels of correspondence between these 2 testaments. And that's what we're going to talk about next. The first level of correspondence is the easiest one to spot, and that is, here's your blank, quotations. Quotations. So a quotation is an intentional high degree of verbal correspondence. It is a direct citation of an Old Testament passage, and it's really, really easy to recognize because it's almost always going to be introduced by a formula. It'll almost always sound like this. So Matthew 2:15, it says that Jesus and his family remained in Egypt until the death of Herod, and then it says, this was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, quote, out of Egypt I called my son. Now that's very obviously directly quoting from the Old Testament. Romans 3:4, by no means let God be true, though everyone were a liar, as it is written, quote, that you may be justified in your words and prevail when you are judged. So those are really easy. That's what we like to call low-hanging fruit. You will notice those every time if you're paying the slightest bit of attention. The second level, which is either down or because it's less obvious or up because it's harder, however you want to think about it, is, here's your blank, allusion. And that's with an A, not with an I. Allusion. Allusion. So this is a unique set of words that thematically correspond to a previous text. Now, there's just no way to make this any easier to say. Allusions are a lot harder to spot, especially when you're just starting out reading the Bible, but they're also way more common in the Bible. So one scholar estimates that there are about 600 allusions in the New Testament to the Old Testament, and that sounds like a lot, except other scholars think it's closer to 4,000. So however you want to slice it, it's a lot. There are a lot of allusions to the Old Testament. Now, allusions don't quote from the Old Testament verbatim. It's not going to start off with, thus saith the Lord. What you have to do to see an allusion is notice parallels. So I've got there in your notes, I've got on one side of that column, Daniel 3, 6, and 11. And on the other side, Matthew 13, 42, and 50. So just to set the scene here, to give you the context, in Daniel 3, it's the story that you all know, maybe one of your favorites in the Jesus Storybook Bible, of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah, that's right. So they're in exile in Babylon, and they're told to worship this statue of Nebuchadnezzar. They refuse, and so what does Nebuchadnezzar do? He throws them in the fire, but what happens? They're saved. Okay, they're rescued. All right, so listen. Daniel 3, 6, and 11. Whoever does not fall down and worship this idol we just talked about shall immediately be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. And then verse 11. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. So that's Daniel. But look at what Jesus does. Matthew 13, 42 and 50. And they, Jesus is speaking, and they, unbelievers, the angels, will throw unbelievers into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And they, angels, will throw them, unbelievers, into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, it's on one level very easy to spot a parallel here, right? They both use this idea of a furnace of flaming fire that someone's getting thrown into. But as you think about it, it starts to get a little confusing. You're like, well, wait. In Daniel, the furnace is for righteous people who won't worship idols. And in Matthew, the furnace is for unrighteous people who do worship idols. But that's the point. What Jesus is saying is on Judgment Day, God's going to take those things that the world designed to use against God's people, and that's the very thing he's going to punish them with. And that's going to be a common thing when you notice allusions. The New Testament writers will allude to something from the Old Testament, but they might flip it on its head, or they might show where that leads to. They're not changing the meaning, they're showing the logical conclusion of that meaning. So in Daniel 3, God's righteous people are rescued from the fire. But think of it this way. In Daniel 3, they're rescued from an earthly fire, but the eternal fire is still burning. And in Matthew 13, that's where unbelievers go. The same thing they wanted to do to God's people will be done to them. So that's a quotation, then an allusion. Third, here's your blank, concept. Concept. And this is when we draw on broad Old Testament themes, patterns, or events. Now, in quotations and allusions, they're referencing one specific verse or one specific story. In a concept, and this is where it gets even harder to spot, the New Testament author is drawing from a theme that runs through the entire Old Testament. So let's read a story that you've now read 4 times in the Gospels, but let's look underneath the surface and see what we can see. So, Sadler, would you read Matthew 8, 23 through 27 for us?
And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves, and he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, Save us, Lord, we are perishing. And he said to them, Why are you afraid, O you of little faith? Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, What sort of man is this, that even winds and sea obey him?
Okay, so even 21st century Americans, if we saw a man stand up and hold up his hand and stop the wind and the waves, we'd think, wow, that's awesome. But there's a lot more going on here. You see, there's a theme that runs through the entire Old Testament of Yahweh as the divine warrior. Yahweh as the divine warrior. This theme gets introduced, you might say, in Exodus chapter 12. Jedediah, would you read Exodus 12:12?
For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord.
So you get this idea of Yahweh walking through the land with a sword and striking down his enemies. So Yahweh, in the Hebrew mind, is a divine warrior. Now, they obviously get out of Egypt and they go into the promised land. And in Joshua, Jackson, don't rock the boat. Talking about Jesus calming the storms. Yes, thank you. All right. So in Joshua, I'm so proud of myself right now for that one. That's so great. In Joshua, hold on, hold that together. Serious. All right. In Joshua, they go into the land and they're fighting the Canaanites. And God says to them, if you obey, and I'm going to read this. I'm going to read Joshua 11, starting in verse 6. The Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them, for tomorrow at this time I will give over all of them, slain to Israel. You'll hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. So Joshua and all his warriors came suddenly against them by the waters of Merom and fell upon them, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Israel. So yes, Joshua and his army are out fighting the battle, but who is ultimately giving them the victory? God, the divine warrior. But let's flip it around. God also warns them, if you disobey, I don't stop being the divine warrior, Cole, but if you disobey Israel, I fight against you. Lamentations 2, 4 through 5. Sophie, would you read this for us?
Yes. Lamentations. He has bent his bow like an enemy, with his right hand set like a bow.
And he has killed all who were delightful in our eyes in the tent of the daughter Zion. He has poured out his fury like fire. The Lord has become like an enemy. He has swallowed up Israel. He has swallowed up all of its palaces. He has laid in ruins its strongholds, and he has multiplied in the daughter of Judah in the land of limitations.
So the Lord has become an enemy. So the Lord is still a divine warrior. Skip over Zechariah 13. Here's what I want you to look at. Psalm 74. So when Jesus stands up and stills the wind and the waves, he's not just saying, wow, look how powerful I am. He's saying, I am Yahweh. Because we know, you guys are experts in this. In the Old Testament, the sea represents the forces of chaos and darkness and fear and death. So Jesus stilling the wind and the waves is him showing, I am Yahweh. I am the divine warrior. Psalm 74, you, Yahweh, divided the sea by your might. You broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. You crushed the heads of Leviathan. You gave him his food for the creatures of the wilderness. In Isaiah 27, in that day, the Lord with his hard and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent. He will slay the dragon that is in the sea. Now, that is not a literal thing. There's not a literal sea monster out there. Sorry, all you Loch Ness monster enthusiasts.
Dang it.
This is an image. This is an image of God's enemies in the sea. Yahweh is the divine warrior. Now, can we just be honest here for a second? Emmett Chambliss is sitting there thinking, ain't no way I'm going to read the New Testament and just get that. I wonder if Jesus is saying he's the divine warrior as referenced in the Old Testament. Well, of course he's not. The first time, maybe the 10th time, or the 20th time. But if Emmett will keep reading the whole Bible over and over again for the rest of his life and keep talking with other believers about what they're reading for the rest of his life, eventually one of them at a Bible study will be like, you know what? Isn't it kind of weird that in the Old Testament, God shows his power by defeating the forces of chaos and darkness in the sea, and Jesus, all 4 Gospels mention still in it. There it is, right? That's what we got to do. I'm not expecting you to see this tonight. I'm not expecting you to go home and read Luke 10 through 13, which you're going to this weekend, and be like, aha, I noticed 75 allusions and concepts to the Old. No, of course not. But we're going to read the Bible the rest of our lives, right?
Yes, sir.
We're going to read the Bible the rest of our lives, right? Yes. And we're going to notice these things. We're going to notice these things and become not full of ourselves, but very humble. So in the time we have left, let's start here. I'm at number 4, the interpretive uses of the Old Testament in the New Testament. So one mistake that we want to avoid is to assume that every Old Testament quotation is being used in the exact same way. But that is not what's happening. So let's look at some different ways that we can see the New Testament writers use the Old Testament. Now, I have been told multiple times that I say this word weird. So let's just all embrace the fact I don't know how to pronounce this word. I say direct, and apparently I should say direct, which just sounds weird. Direct. Yeah, direct, right? Am I not saying that?
You're saying
Right.
direct.
Yeah, you're saying like
Whatever I'm saying, that's what I want you to write in that blank. Direct fulfillment. Direct fulfillment. However, direct. Whatever. I'm going to just embrace it. I'm from East Tennessee.
Right.
Thank you, Jackson. All right. Shh. So in this use, this is when a New Testament author wants to demonstrate how something that has happened in Jesus' life or in the church is a fulfillment of a prophecy from the Old Testament. So again, these are often, not always, but most often, going to have one of those as it is written formulas attached. And so these are fairly straightforward. The Old Testament made a prediction. Something happened in the New Testament that fulfilled that prediction. So for example, Matthew 2, 5 through 6, Herod wants to know where the Messiah is going to be born. And he asks the scribes and Pharisees, and it says, they told him, quote, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet. And then he quotes from Micah, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. So that was prophesied by Micah. The Messiah will be born in Bethlehem. Guess where Jesus was born? Bethlehem. So fulfillment. Another one, Luke 4:17 through 21. Do I have time to do this? Yes, I do. Jesus' first sermon. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor." So Jesus is now reading from Isaiah. "He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he stops. Now here's what I want you to see. Let's look at what Jesus is actually reading from. I want you to see if you notice the difference. So Luke 4 has Jesus' first sermon where Jesus reads from Isaiah 61. And this is what Isaiah 61 says. "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prisons to those who are bound, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Now, isn't that where Jesus stopped? Isn't that the last thing Jesus said from Isaiah? To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor? Yes, it is. But look where Isaiah says next. "And the day of vengeance of our God." Jesus didn't mention that. Now, did he run out of time? No. Remember how we talked yesterday about this two-stage fulfillment? I think Jesus is right here in his very first sermon, tipping his hat that there is a two-stage fulfillment. The first time Jesus came, his mission was to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Freedom to the captives. If you want to be made right with God, Jesus is here to bring it about. But the second time, and there will be a second time, the second time Jesus comes, what is he here to do? Vengeance. And at that point, it will be too late to get into the year of the Lord's favor. So yes, these quotations are often easy to spot, but if you'll pay attention to their original context, you will see something really cool and something different that you haven't seen before. So what page are we on our notes? 6. All right. So your homework.
We're like 56.